Thursday, March 25th, 2021, meeting of the Advisory Committee to order. Welcome, everyone. This meeting is being held remotely as an alternative means of public access pursuant to an order issued by the Governor of Massachusetts, dated March 12, 2020, suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law. You are hereby advised that this meeting and all communications during this meeting may be recorded by the town of Hingham in accordance with the open meeting law. If any participant wishes to record this meeting, please notify the chair at the start of the meeting in accordance with Mass General Laws, Chapter 30A, Section 20F, so that the chair may inform all other participants of said recording. As the advisory committee has done throughout this year, we will be recording, and our recording will be available on the Harbor Media YouTube. We are also live streaming tonight with Harbor Media, whom we thank for the great community services that they provide. If there is anyone else that is independently recording this meeting tonight, if they could identify themselves by name and street address so that we can advise all participants. Either use the raise the hand function or make some prominent sign on screen. I am not seeing anybody, so we will operate under the assumption that no further recordings are made. I would also like to welcome our friends from the Board of Selectmen tonight and from the school committee. And Mary, if you would deem this to be an appropriate time to call your board to order, please go ahead.
Thank you, Bob. Good evening. I'd like to call the Board of Selectmen meeting to order for Thursday, March 25th, 2021, adopting the same statement as read by Mr. Curley, and indicate that the members of the board who will be participating remotely in this meeting are myself, Joe Fisher, and Bill Ramsey, who will be joining the meeting at approximately 7:30. Thank you.
Thank you. And Carrie Nee, welcome. This is an appropriate time to call your board to order. Please proceed.
Thank you, Bob. I would like to call the March 25th, 2021 meeting of the school committee to order and also adopt the statement read by the chair. My colleagues, Jen Benham, Carlos De Silva, Libby Lewicki will be participating remotely, as will I. And we are expecting Ness Carenti and Liza O'Reilly to join us as well.
All right, thank you. And item number 2 on our agenda is questions from the public on items not on the agenda. Is there any member of the public that has a question about or comment about something that is not on the agenda? If so, please identify yourself by name and address. Please use the raise hand function, which I would encourage everybody to use tonight because of the number of people participating. It's hard to see people making gestures on the screen, but the raise hand function is great. I don't see any raised hands, so we will proceed to item 3 on our agenda tonight. And of course, the main event on our agenda tonight is review and voting of the budgets. Item 3 is kind of a preliminary to our review of the budgets. And I do want to indicate that I have sent this afternoon, as Sue Nickerson sent to me, the present forecast, which shows a zero balance. The $7,000 odd that was shown as a surplus previously was added to capital. And we will be talking about the capital budget later in the evening after we review all of the other budgets. I don't know that I have anything to add about the multiple financial items on item 3 of our agenda. If there is anyone else that has something that they wish to add about the forecast, financial policy, fund balance, overrides or debt exclusions, for the ACE's recommendation at this point, please raise their hand. Victor? Victor? You're on mute.
All right, sorry about that, Bob. So for clarification, on the forecast, there's a line item for fund balance at 2367817. That, how was that derived? Was it simply that we determined all of the asks, both school and municipal side, including the additionals, and found out what was left, and that's where the fund balance number came from?
It is my understanding that that number is made up of the one-time fund balance money for the 3 items of lost revenue on the municipal and education budgets, together with the anticipated one-time money from the America Recovery Act and from the 2 ESSER programs. But I am always willing to be educated by those more knowledgeable than myself. So Sue, if you want to amend or amplify that, go ahead.
All right, Victor, I think you are looking at the previous forecast. We just updated.
I did not get one this afternoon. Bob sent one around, so.
Oh, okay.
So
how about?
Hey, Sue, I'll show it when I do my thing, if you want to do it then.
Okay, what we did was we put all one-time monies and fund balance in one lump sum under fund balance. And the 2.3 you're talking about is, yes, it is the lost revenue from local receipts, plus the lost revenue of the school side, plus the one-time expenses from the school side. And if you need the amounts, it is lost revenue for local receipts is $1,430,380. The lost revenue from the school side was $545,437. And the one-time expenses for the school side was $392,000 even.
Okay, thank you, Sue.
You're welcome.
I don't see any other hands raised. If there are no other questions or comments about the generic financial matters in item 3, we go on to item 4, which is a review and discussion of a draft comment on Article F, which is Article 6, the budgets article. And ordinarily, the comment simply states the Selectmen and Advisory Committee unanimously voted in support of the following. And that's amplified by the 6 minutes of exposition that the AdCom chair is permitted. And this year, however, because it has been such an unusual year, we thought that it might be a good thing to amplify that comment to Article 6, in addition to the Advisory Committee report and the reports of the Board of Selectmen and the School Committee, and in addition to the verbal comments. So I have asked Julie to take a crack at drafting that comment, which she circulated earlier today. So I'll turn it over to you, Julie.
Okay, thank you, Bob. I just want to state first that I circulated a draft titled Article E. I'm not sure. I was having trouble matching my fingers and letters to numbers. So anyway, it's Article 6, but.
And Julie, for the benefit of the other boards and the public, it might be a good idea for you to hit the highlights of that comment before.
Yeah. So like Bob said, usually it just says that everyone voted unanimously for the budget and that's it. This year, the comment begins with how the fiscal 22 budget seeks to address the challenges due to the effects of the COVID-19 pandemic and some increased needs in the town and school departments, paraphrasing. And I itemize that the first, this budget relies on $5 million in one-time funds coming from several sources. Number one, $2.4 million from fund balance, also known as available reserves or free cash. The proposed use of fund balance is to fund one-time revenue losses, which conforms to the town's financial policy. And two, $2.6 million in federal stimulus funds in the form of $1.2 million for fiscal year 22 from the American Recovery Plan and $1.4 million from the Elementary and Secondary School Emergency Relief Fund, also known as ESSER. And then I cite that additionally $1.2 million of American Recovery funding is available for the town to use apportioned across fiscal year 23 and 24 budgets. And I go into, well, we have only broad guidance right now about any constraints on the use of the federal stimulus funds, but we expect to be able to apply them to expenses this year. However, if annual town meeting approves this budget and the town is not able to use all of the federal funding on allowable expenses, then additional fund balance will need to be used to cover the revenue shortfall. And then I have a next paragraph, final paragraph, says that because a portion of the fiscal year 22 budget relies on these one-time funding sources, the town will need to begin a collective effort to plan for how to sustainably fund the fiscal year 23 budget and beyond. These efforts include strategic financial planning in both the school department and municipal departments and guidance from the town's master plan. If not enough revenue can be raised, possibly from an operating override among other sources, then the town will have to contract its services. And then I did add at the end that about unanimous vote, or, I would change it if we didn't have a unanimous vote, but I also added in the school committee voted unanimously in support of the school budget, which is something new, but I thought might be useful to have for this year.
Questions or comments from members of the advisory committee? I don't see any. And are there, Mary, if there are questions or comments from the Board of Selectmen? No, thank you. Carrie Nee, any questions or comments from the school committee?
Any of the members of the committee have any comments or questions? Could you just use the raise hand function? I can't see everyone. Okay, seeing none.
Okay, thank you. So then we will come to, thank you,
Hey, Bob.
Julie. Yes.
Sorry to interrupt, but I just wanted to state that I do say that the total federal stimulus funds for fiscal year 22 will be used to fund the additional request of 36 new positions. So it does lay it out. There's 32 new school employees and 4 municipal employees. So.
Thank you, Julie, for your work on that. So we will then come to our, I'm sorry, Victor, go ahead.
Yeah, I don't know, again, whether this relates here, but so on those positions, do we have any indication, are there restrictions, do we know, within the federal monies in terms of their ability, our ability to use them for new positions?
I don't think that my knowledge of that or the collective knowledge of that has been refined to that point yet as to specifically how the federal money will ultimately be used within the town. I don't know if Tom Mayo or Michelle Monsegur, if they've joined us.
Yep, I'm here, Bob.
Yeah, Tom, would you like to respond to that?
If you're asking about the available uses of the ARP money, is that right?
Of the federal money, yes, that's right.
Yeah. So I'm going to do this slowly in case Michelle can find them, but my recollection is that there were 4 available uses. One was for lost revenue. Another was for, in essence, hazard pay for qualifying municipal employees. A third was, Michelle or Sue, do you remember the last 2?
There was a broad one, let me read it. Basically for responding to the public health emergency with respect to COVID or its negative economic impacts. So that seems broadly tied to a COVID-related reason. And the last one was for
water, sewer, and
That's right. Utilities. Yep.
Yeah.
Victor, I will say that we're expecting significantly more guidance on definitions of terms within those general categories. Hopefully by the end of this week, early next week, somewhere in there. I was on a call with the Lieutenant Governor who told us that that guidance was forthcoming.
Yeah, I mean, my concern is just if, well, I guess maybe they can be allocated in different ways, but if the point is to just keep everyone whole and we're adding positions in any department, would that put that money at risk or not being able to use it for it? That's sort of where I'm coming from.
Yeah, it's unknown. That's why I think in part why Julie gave the clarification that for some reason, if that one-time stimulus money was not a valid use, we would have to use fund balance. But from our preliminary read, it looks like we would be able to use it for this 1 year.
Okay, thanks, Tom.
Actually, we can use it through the end of 2024.
Oh, I'm sorry. Right, 2 years. That's right, Bob. Thank you.
Yeah. All right. And Andy, you have a question or comment?
Yes, Julie, in that sentence of your second paragraph in the comment where it says the additional request of 36 new positions, I would suggest you change that to 36 new full-time equivalents. And then in the parentheses, 32 in the schools and 4 in municipal departments. Several of the positions that in the school budget are not new positions, but increases in hours of people currently on the payroll and doing the work they will continue to be doing for additional hours.
Thank you, Andy.
Thanks, Andy.
I also got a note from Dave. I think I called the American, it's recovery plan, but it's really the American Rescue Plan. So I will correct that because that would be bad to get that wrong.
Okay. If there are no further comments or questions, Andy, you've still got your hand up. Okay, there we go. We will then proceed to item 5, the review, discussion, and vote on all budgets. And the way we propose to proceed tonight is that moderator-like, in order to streamline things if possible, I will be reading the budget items for each of the budgets, and then indicating if there's a discrepancy between the selectmen's vote and our prior recommendation, and there are a few. And I will say that in general, they relate to salary adjustments with respect to salaries and to increased water costs on the expense side. But we'll identify those as we go through. I will then
He did it to himself.
We're all going to have to get mugs, Bob. You're on mute.
all right. Sorry, I don't know how that happened, but in any event,
I don't know how that happened either. I'm sorry.
I guess I need to start again. So moderator-like, I am going to go through the line items of each budget for salaries, expenses, or any additional items. If there is a discrepancy between our prior recommendation and the Board of Selectmen, I'm going to identify those discrepancies and offer brief explanations, which I think I have, but which again can be amplified by others. In general, they relate to increased expenses because of water costs. And with respect to salaries, there have been some salary increases that needed to be accommodated in the budget. I will then ask the liaison if the liaison is prepared to recommend the amounts that I have read or has further comments. And if there is a recommendation, we'll then ask if anybody wants to hold that budget for any reason. And if the reason is a quick question, we'll try to resolve the question so that we can try to proceed through this long list of budgets. Then when we hopefully get to the end of the base budgets, and we will set aside all the additional requests until we have an opportunity to vote on the base budgets. And then we will address any held items, if any. And then we will turn our attention to the additional requests. Tom Mayo and Michelle Monsegur have some slides and a presentation on those additional requests, all of which are on the, with respect to municipal budgets. And Julie has a few brief prepared comments, and then we will turn individually to the additional budget requests and proceed until we get to the point where we are prepared to vote on them. We hopefully could vote on them collectively. If not, we may have to take separate votes on each of the additional requests. After we finish the additional requests, we will then turn to the capital outlay budget, which has been revised since the last time we saw it. And we regret that Libby Claypool is not with us tonight. She has been the town's expert on capital for at least 10 years now, it seems. But her quick understudy, David Lane Cooper, is going to take over for Libby on that. So any questions about the procedure? Not seeing any. Let's begin. So I have Selectmen. The Board of Selectmen vote was for payroll, $502,153, and for expenses of $83,590. The expenses number is the same as our prior recommendation. Our prior recommendation on payroll was $493,753. So it's gone up roughly $8,000 to $9,000. And it's my understanding that that is to partially accommodate expected contractually due raises for Tom Mayo and Michelle Monsegur. So I would ask Andy McElhaney as the liaison, are you prepared to recommend payroll of $502,153 and expenses of $83,590, or do you desire further discussion? You're on mute.
I'm prepared to recommend those numbers.
Thank you. Anyone want to hold this item for any reason? If so, raise your hand. I don't see any. So we go on to human resources. Payroll, $147,624, and expenses, $3,650, which are the exact numbers that we previously recommended. Brenda Black, are you prepared to recommend those numbers?
I am.
Thank you. Anyone want to hold that article, that item? I don't see any. Reserve fund, $664,578. That was our previous recommendation. Victor Baltera, Are you prepared to make that recommendation?
Yes, I recommend that.
Does anyone want to hold that item? Not seeing any. Town accountant, payroll, 292,016. Expenses, 11,355. Audit, $71,500. Those were all the previously recommended numbers. Andy, that's your budget. Are you prepared to recommend those figures?
I am.
Does anyone want to hold that article? Information technology, payroll, 295,439. Expenses, 276,714. Those are the numbers previously recommended. And Daveline, that's your budget. Are you prepared to recommend those?
Yes, I recommend those items.
Does anyone want to hold that article, that item? I don't see any hands. Assessors, $261,635 for payroll, $14,513 for expenses, $37,190 for consulting, and $500 for map maintenance. Those are the same numbers previously recommended. Daveline, that's your budget as well. Do you want to make that recommendation?
Yes, I do. I recommend those amounts.
Anyone want to hold that item? I don't see any.
Is that all?
Yeah.
Treasurer collector, payroll, $357,327. Expenses, $49,820. Tax titles, $10,000. Those are the same as our previous recommendations. Andy, that's your budget. Are you prepared to make that recommendation?
I am.
Any hold on that item? I see none. Legal services, $257,000. That was our previous recommendation, and there is an additional request that we'll address later. Andy, that's your budget. Are you prepared to recommend the number for the base budget?
Yes, I am.
Any hold on that item? Town meetings. Payroll, $2,692. Expenses, $40,750. Those are the amounts of our prior recommendations. Brenda, that's your budget. Are you prepared to recommend those numbers?
Yes, I do recommend those numbers.
Town clerk, payroll, $195,365. Expenses, $5,616. Daveline, that's your budget. Were you prepared? Are you prepared to? And those are the same numbers we recommended before.
Yes, I recommend those numbers.
Thank you. Elections. Payroll. $6,950. Expenses, $16,370. Those are the same numbers as our previous recommendation. Daveline, that's your budget as well. Are you prepared to recommend those numbers?
Yes, I recommend the election budget as it was proposed.
Any hold on that item? I see none. Conservation Commission, payroll, $200,877. Expenses, $13,256. Victor, that's your budget. Those are the same numbers previously recommended.
I recommend it.
Thank you. Any hold on that item? Community, I see none. Community planning, payroll, $166,861. Expenses, $24,205. Victor, that's your budget as well. There are some additional requests later. Are you prepared to recommend the number for the base budget?
Yes. Yes, as I said the other day, I recommend that.
Okay. Land use and development. One payroll, $151,283. Expenses, $7,375. Now, there, on the payroll number, the AdCom recommendation previously was $147,890. It's gone up to $151,283. It's my understanding that's because an administrative assistant needed to be budgeted as one step higher. So with that explanation, Victor, are you prepared to recommend that budget?
Yes, I recommend the elevated budget as you just described it.
Thank you. Any hold on that budget? I see none. Bear Cove Park, payroll, $19,034. Expenses, $9,390. Those are the amounts of our previous recommendation. Dave Aline, that's your budget. Are you prepared to make that recommendation?
Yes, I do recommend the numbers previously stated for Bear Cove Park.
Andy, I see that your hand is up.
Oh, I'm sorry, that's a mistake.
Okay. Does anyone want to? Alan McDonald, I see your hand is up.
I'm sorry, I wanted to confirm from the previous item that the misclassification was just that. It was a misclassification, not a result of the classification study or any of that. Just sort of
No,
figured out.
it was a miss step in the beginning.
Thanks.
Okay. Any hold on that item? Okay. Town Hall, payroll, $257,966, expenses, $448,412. The payroll number is the same as previously recommended. The expense number is actually slightly lower, which reflects the absence of the line item for expenses for 335 Lincoln Street and the addition of some expense money for water costs. So the numbers again are 257,966 for payroll and 448,412 for expenses. Brenda Black, that's your budget. Are you prepared to make a recommendation for those numbers?
I am.
Thank you. Any hold on that item? Grand Army Memorial Hall, $19,752. That's the same amount as our previous recommendation. Kristen, that's your budget. Are you prepared to make that recommendation?
Yeah, I just want to point out that this one did increase just by $60 for the water. So it was not the previous recommendation.
Thank you. I don't know how I missed that, but.
And I'm frozen now. Okay.
Appreciate it. Thank you. Any hold on that item? Okay, we come to public safety. Police Department. Set payroll, $5,873.802. Expenses, $396,900. And those are the amounts of our previous recommendations. There are additional requests that we'll come to later. Dave Aline, are you prepared to recommend those numbers?
Yes, I recommend the police department budget as stated.
Okay. Fire department, $5,632.401 in payroll, $510,273 in expenses. And our previous recommendation for payroll was $5,618.989. It was lower. And
I
for
think you made
expenses
5
was
million.
5 million. Thank you. I'll probably do that again. 5
No,
million.
somewhere the chief is apoplectic, Bob.
Tell the
I guess we can balance the budget without one-time money.
That's true.
$5,618,989 for payroll was our prior recommendation. And for expenses, $509,259. Those were both lower. As I understand the payroll, that again was salary adjustments. And I'm not sure I'm going to remember the expenses. I know, Erin, you looked into this.
Yes, the expenses was water, the distinction.
Okay. The fire department needs water? And are you prepared to recommend those increased numbers, Erin?
Yes, I recommend the adjusted budget.
Thank you. Dispatch search, does anyone want to hold that? Good. Dispatch services, $941,182. And that was the same as our recommendation. Evan, that's your budget. Are you prepared to make that recommendation?
I most certainly am, although I'm not sure it was my budget.
Oh,
It was mine, but I agree with Evan.
okay. Thank you. All right. Building commissioner, payroll, $238,750. Expenses, $15,960. Those were our prior recommendations. I think that's your budget as well. Erin, are you prepared to
Yes.
recommend those things?
I do.
Thank you. Any hold on those items? I see none. Animal control, payroll, $69,099. Expenses, $6,200. Those are our previous recommendations. Tina, that was your budget. Are you prepared to make that recommendation?
I am.
Thank you. Anyone want to hold that? Harbor Master, $298. I'm sorry. My eyes are going to fail me. $208,151 for payroll and $75,138 for expenses. Those were our previous recommendations. George, that was your budget. Are you prepared to make that recommendation?
It's me, Bob.
Thank you. And anyone want to hold that? I see no hands. Public safety utilities, emergency water, $454,466. Street lighting, $105,000. And our previous recommendation on the water was $414,060, which is about $40,000 less. It's my understanding that's due to water. And Erin, that's your budget. Are you prepared to recommend the increased numbers?
I am.
Thank you. We come to education. And we have payroll of 51 million, I knew I'd do it again, 905,346, and expenses of 9,886,733. And I believe that is the same, when we add those up, that is the same as the ACE's recommendation of 61,792,079. Dave Anderson, as chair of ACES, you prepared to make that recommendation?
Yeah, that's ACE's unanimous recommendation.
Is there any hold on that item? I see none. Highway, Recreation, Tree and Park, payroll, $2,441,126. Expenses, $801,923. Snow removal, $563,365. And road maintenance, $385,500. The expenses have gone up by, I think, $50 from our previous recommendation, which I understand is related to water. And George Dennis, that's your budget. Are you prepared to recommend that those slightly increased numbers? George, are you on mute?
I don't even see him.
He quit over his salary.
Unless it's George iPhone. Is that George? Oh, there you are. George, you're on mute.
George, are you back with us?
He gave a thumbs up.
I think he meant a thumbs up to say that he recommended it,
Yeah,
but
I think so.
I think he was trying to steal Carlos's Wi-Fi.
All right, well, let's if there's any doubt about that thumbs up as being a recommendation, we'll check with George when he gets back to us, hopefully in better technological shape later. Landfill recycling, payroll, 621,535, and expenses, $1,034,006. Our previous recommendation on expenses was $1,033,482, and I understand the increase is due to water. Nancy, that is your budget. Are you prepared to make that recommendation?
I am. I recommend it as you just stated.
Thank you. Sewer Commission. Payroll, 382,737. Expenses, 300,785. Engineering, 10,000. MWRA charges, 2,280,148. Debt service, 72,720. Hull intermunicipal agreement, 445,869. And those are all the same numbers that we previously recommended. Brenda, I believe that's your budget. Are you prepared to make that recommendation?
I recommend those numbers as you read.
Any hold on that item?
Hey, Bob, can you hear me now, Bob?
I can hear you now, George.
All right.
So we interpreted your thumbs up as an affirmative recommendation on the highway recreation tree and park. Were we correct?
You were correct, and I also give you the thumbs up on the harbor master. Apologize for the technological difficulties here.
Okay, thank you. Health Department, payroll, 343,542. Expenses, 19,862. Those are the same as our previous recommendations. Brenda, are you prepared to make that recommendation?
I am.
Thank you. Any hold on that item? I see none. Elder Services, payroll, 268,206, and expenses, 24,889. Those are the same as our previous recommendations. Julie, that's your budget. Are you prepared to make that recommendation?
yes, I am.
Veteran, any hold on that item? Veteran Services, payroll, 109,522, expenses, 8,610. Benefits, 171,796. Those are the same amounts previously recommended. Nancy, I believe that's your budget. Are you prepared to make that recommendation?
That's my budget.
Oh, yeah. I'm sorry. I thought you were going to help.
Oh, did I? I'm sorry.
That's okay.
I know there was some shifting within groups. Kristen, are you prepared to make that recommendation?
I am.
Thank you. Any hold on that item? I see none. Library, payroll, 1,559,000.
Hey, Bob,
Yes.
you forgot health imperatives and social women's.
Oh, I did. You're right. Thank you.
Welcome.
Those single line items are,
I know they're pesky little things, aren't they?
they are. Health imperatives, $2,700. That's the same as previous recommendation. Nancy, I believe that's yours.
And I recommend it. Yes.
Any hold on that? I see none. South Shore Women's Center, $3,700. That's the same as our previous recommendation. Nancy, that's your budget as well. Are you prepared to recommend that?
I recommend the 3,700.
And I see, is there any hold on that? I see none. Culture and Recreation, Library, payroll, $1,559,866. Expenses, $369,798. And those are the same amounts as our previous recommendations. I'm sorry, the expenses went up from 369,200, and that is due to water. So about a $600 increase. Andy, that's your budget. Are you prepared to recommend the increase amounts?
I am prepared and do recommend the payroll and expenses as you read them, including the increase.
Any hold on that item? I see none. Recreation Commission payroll, $108,096 and expenses of $0. And there are some additional requests that we'll address later on. The payroll amount is the same that was previously recommended. Dave Anderson, I believe that's your budget. Do you recommend the payroll amount?
I do.
Any hold on that budget? Trustees of, I see none. Trustees of the Bathing Beach. Payroll, $26,832. Expenses, $11,750. The expenses are up $300 from our prior recommendation due to increased water charges. Dave, that is your budget. Are you prepared to make that recommendation?
I am.
Historical Commission, payroll, $75,679, and expenses, $7,363. That's the same as our previous recommendation. Kristen, I believe that's your budget. Are you prepared to make?
Yes, I am.
Thank you. And any hold on that? I see none. Celebration, $17,107. That's the same as the previous recommendation. Kristen, that's your budget. Are you prepared to recommend that?
Yes, I recommend that amount.
Any hold on that? I see none. The Country Club, payroll, $890,830. Expenses, $908,350. Debt service, $92,000. Now, in the AdCom previous recommendation, that's exactly the same. So, and I think Dave Aline, you are pinch hitting for Libby on this tonight. The expense, no, I think those are the same.
I think there was an increase due to water.
I think you may be right. I think it's because we aggregated in our prior recommendation the debt service and the expenses. So I think the increase due to water is about.
I think it was about $4,000.
No, it wasn't 4, it was 1,900.
Okay. So Dave Aline, are you prepared to recommend the increased numbers?
Yes, I am. Libby has authorized me to do so, and she's already given, and she gave me those numbers, so.
Okay. Any hold on that item? I see none. Debt service. $5 million.
Bob, you need Ware River.
Oh, you're right. Sorry. Ware River Water System. I'll never make a good moderator.
You're just making me, keep on my toes too.
Payroll, $257,434. Expenses, $6,369,790, and debt service, $5,788,969. And those are the amounts that we previously recommended, except we we aggregated the expenses and the pilot. Was there a water increase on that?
I would think not.
I was going to say, are you being ironic?
I know. I was wondering the same thing.
Dave, that's your budget. Are you prepared to recommend?
Recommend it as you read it.
Any hold on that? Okay. Debt service, $5,707,376. That's the same as our previous recommendation. That's your budget, Evan. Are you prepared to recommend that number?
I am.
And any hold on that? I see none. Employee benefits, group insurance, $7,146,355, and that is down from our previous recommendation of $7,347,181. And I will let Sue provide the explanation.
Okay, it came down because in our original recommendation, we have a 10% increase of the current year's budget. GIC came in at around 5%. So we reduced the budget by that amount. Plus we added money for the 36 new employees. So it is still a decrease.
So Evan, are you happy to recommend the decreased number?
I am, and I'm not going to mess with Sue. So yes.
Is there any?
Yeah, very smart, Evan. Very, very smart.
Bob, I hold for purposes of abstaining when we come to vote.
So you're not desirous of any further discussion or clarification?
No.
You just want to abstain?
That's right.
Okay. Other post-employment benefits, $1,267,567, which is the amount of our prior recommendation. Evan, we're still with you. Are you?
I'm still there with the original recommendation. We're good to go.
Okay. Any hold on that? I see none.
Bob, I will hold that one too.
For the same reason.
Same reason.
Okay. And contributory retirement, $5,443,559, which is the same as the prior recommendation. Evan, it's your budget again.
I'm still good, Bob.
You're recommending that?
I am recommending that budget. Yep.
Thank you. Any hold on that? I see none. Workers' compensation, $330,000, which is the same as our prior recommendation. Evan, we're still with you. Do you recommend that?
Yeah, I do recommend it, but only if I always get the it is what it is budgets in perpetuity throughout the rest of my time on AdCom, because I get to work with Sue.
You can't bind a future AdCom chair. And Julie told me you're going to have a very interesting year next year.
Yeah. No, I recommend that budget.
Hold on that. I see none. Unemployment, 30,000, which is the same as the previous recommendation. Do you recommend that as well, Evan?
Yes, I do.
Any hold on that? I see none. Unclassified property and liability insurance.
Bob, you forgot mandatory Medicare.
Oh. Mandatory Medicare, $1,102,935, which is down from our previous recommendation of $1,177,935. And I will again let Sue provide the reason.
And that's exactly the same reason as group insurance. We usually budget it at 10% increase. And what I did is I took all the salary line items, multiplied it by 145%, which is the mandatory tax, and added all the additional requests of salary and came up with the 1,102,935.
And do you recommend that number, Evan?
I do recommend that, Bob.
Is there any hold? I see none. All right, unclassified. 1,028,000,
No.
property and liability. $1,028,087, which is the same as the previous recommendation we made. Evan, that's yours as well. Do you recommend that?
I do recommend that, Bob.
Okay. And is there any hold on that? I see none. So that gives us a grand total, exclusive of capital, of base budgets of 128,698,251. Is there any further discussion?
Did you take out the two that Victor held? Because that's not the amount I have.
That's the amount at the bottom of my sheet on the selectmen vote.
Yeah, but you got to deduct the ones that Victor held if we're going to vote them all at once.
So the two different sheets, I mean, the sheet that you're reading off of, Bob, has the 128 figure. And then you also sent around town administrator budget recommendations, which has a 130 figure.
The one you're reading, Bob, on education, does it have?
Oh, that's right. That's right. That deducted the ESSER funds. Okay.
Okay. All right.
Okay, I got it now. So
Okay.
the grand total should be $130,074,443. And is there any further discussion? If not, I think we come to vote.
What about Dave's point that don't you have to first deduct the two items that were held?
Victor's only abstaining.
I was going to get there, Andy, if you gave me a moment.
Okay.
So we come to vote on all of the budgets apart from the two that Victor was abstaining on, group insurance and other post-employment benefits. So do we have a motion to approve the recommended amounts of all of those budgets?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All right. Dave Aline,
Aye.
Julie,
Aye.
Tina,
Aye.
Evan,
Aye.
Brenda,
Aye.
Andy,
Aye.
Alan,
Aye.
Kristen,
Aye.
Dave,
Aye.
George,
Aye.
Victor,
Aye.
Aaron,
Aye.
Nancy.
Aye.
I've been searching across my screen. I think I got everybody. So it's a 13-0-1 vote. And then we will come to the two budgets on which Victor is abstaining: group insurance and other post-employment benefits. Is there a motion to approve those budgets in the stated amounts?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
And we then come to vote. Dave Aline,
Aye.
Julie,
Aye.
Tina,
Aye.
Evan,
Aye.
Brenda,
Aye.
Andy,
Aye.
Alan,
Aye.
Kristen,
Aye.
Dave,
Aye.
George,
Aye.
Victor,
Aye.
Aaron,
Aye.
Nancy.
Aye.
And again, I think I got everybody, so that would be a 12-0-1 vote with the Victor abstaining on both. So we Then come to the town administrator recommended additional requests. And at this point in time, I wanted to give Tom Mayo and Michelle Monsiger an opportunity to further address those requests. We thank them for their previous presentation. They've been given additional questions from various members of the advisory committee, and I thought this would be a good opportunity for them to answer those questions.
Great. Thank you very much, Bob. Michelle is bringing our presentation up on the screen. We will go through this relatively quickly. Of course, if there are questions, we're happy to go back and recover anything. This is in large part the presentation that Michelle and I gave to the Board of Selectmen on Tuesday night, with a couple of additional slides just to have touch base on all 8 of the additional recommendations just one last time.
No.
Okay, go ahead, Michelle. So here is the slide with all of our 8 recommendations. These are listed in priority order. Nothing has changed here since the last presentation, with the exception of that bottom line. At the time, we were recommending a one-time $500,000 infusion into capital. Through the budget process, that number has been reduced to $300,000. So the Assistant Town Administrator for Finance, this is our first recommendation. We're trying to solve 3 main issues here. One is just basically providing capacity for large scale financial planning and analysis. This is something right now that is done. We support and do everything we can along the way, but due to time constraints, in large part, this is a responsibility that is being fulfilled by volunteers, and that's not a model I think that can continue, nor do I think it's in the best interest of the town. So we want to make sure that we're able to provide the time it takes to dig into those issues. The other issues are we're providing capacity for things like oversight and responsiveness to the public, to boards and committees, to all of our employees, and especially our department heads. And that comes with improved communications as well. We are in part an unfortunate bottleneck at times that we do the best we can, but it's difficult at times to get back to all 23, 24 department heads that have questions and need guidance in a timely manner when we're in meetings and on the phone all day. So, but we do the best we can, and this position would increase that capacity appropriately. So the size and complexity of the town does continue to grow. We'll go over this in a little bit more detail, but the responsibility of the TA's office has increased significantly with the TA Special Act that was passed in 2015 as a bylaw and as a special act in Massachusetts law in 2016. So just to recap, this plan would create a new ATA for finance that would be in addition to the existing ATA, which is in essence the operations ATA. Brief history, back in 1992 and years prior, the town had an executive secretary. In 1995, it switched over to a town administrator. At that time, the town identified a need for an assistant to the town administrator, and that position evolved in 2005 to the ATA. It's important to note that in 2009 and 10 is the first time that we were able to identify a discussion among the Board of Selectmen and the existing town administrator at the time regarding the need for a second ATA. That was back in 2009 and 10, so 10 to 12 years ago or so. These are a couple of items that I think help to underscore some of what we talk about when we talk about the need for capacity. So over the course of the past 15 years or so, we've more than doubled the revenue picture for the town, which in large part mirrors the budget. And I think equally telling is the number of selectmen's meetings doesn't seem like an overly strong metric, except that what that does is you got to remember that every one of those agendas has, 5 to 10 or so items on it, all of which require significant research and background work to help drive the policy in the right way. So I do think that that the number of Board of Selectmen meetings is telling of the complexity and the use of local government in Hingham. So the TA Special Act, as I said, was passed as a bylaw in 2015, a special act in 2016, and it really expanded the TA's authority. It did codify it, but it really was expanding the TA's authority in several ways. Some of the most telling were the personnel management. My position is now responsible for management of all personnel in town, with the exception, obviously, of the school department and in the police force. The Board of Selectmen does, in fact, hire the police force, in addition to a couple, the 2 chiefs and the DPW director as well. But all other personnel now fall under the TA's responsibility. In addition, you have all the financial responsibilities for all of the metrics. I am, in fact, the CFO, the Chief Procurement Officer. I am the Chief Administrative Officer, and property management decisions, et cetera, I'll go along with that. There are 4 stated evaluative criteria that you can see are very general and broad in nature. We supervise all employees. We administer the town government. That's, all the day-to-day functions in town. We effectuate any policy and implement said policy across the board that is made by whichever body is deemed appropriate to make it, whether it's town meeting or the Board of Selectmen or others. And then we help, obviously, establish goals for the town. So those are the 4 stated evaluative criteria within the TA bylaw, the TA Special Act. Complexity of operations. These are some of the things that are in front of us, not necessarily active or in the past, but this is a glimpse into the future, what we're heading into. So I'm talking a lot about the current day complexity of town government. These are the items that are on the horizon in addition to the current complexities. So several large capital projects, and large capital projects take an awful lot of time. I know Paul and John know that over on the school and in the schools, and we certainly feel it in the municipal sector as well. We have to implement the master plan. The master plan was just completed a month or so ago. Now we need to move into an implementation phase. We have the South Hingham developments, process. This is the economic driver for all of the future efforts in Hingham. The South Hingham development needs to be done respectfully for the neighborhoods down there, and in a well thought out manner to fund all of the initiatives that the schools and the town that drive the schools in the town for the future in this town. Revitalization of downtown. We're talking at length about integrating the harbor with the downtown area. We've spoken. We have a climate study article before town meeting this year. That is that's an important issue that's going to be before this town for the next several years. They're talking about setting a 2040 deadline for meeting zero emission standards, and there's going to take a lot of planning for the municipal government to be able to meet those goals. Water system acquisition and transition. It's a big deal. We just increased our responsibility significantly by obtaining a multi-community utility. So the current TA and ATA shared responsibilities, I won't go through all these. Some of the highlights, you've seen this before: 200 plus employees, 400 plus elected and appointed officials across 60 some boards and committees. All of them are the work they're doing is the most important work to them, and they are volunteers of their time and their efforts, and they deserve the appropriate attention from me and my office, and I feel strongly about that. And many of you have felt the necessary or the pain of delays of my availability, and I do my best to limit that, but that's an unfortunate reality that needs to change. There's a lot of other items throughout here. There's 24 department heads, et cetera, selectmen's meetings, town meeting coordination, logistics, and the like. But that's all the stuff that's currently being done by Michelle and I right now. So what we would hope the ATA for Finance would be able to assist with would be bigger picture, longer term financial analysis. This is the financial planning, long-term financial planning for the town. A deeper engagement in the budget process. We see the need for this in this year's process alone. We need to look for additional money outside of the Hingham taxpayer. That's something I've heard from this board several times, specifically your current chair. There's a need and our opportunities to go out and find non-Hingham taxpayer revenue to help us pay for the things that we do here, and that needs to become a priority. Tracking federal funding along the same lines as comment prior. Greater financial coordination, that's mainly with this board. There are other boards. The personnel board, for one, plays a role there. We would like very much to work closely with Dr. Austin and his staff and the school committee going forward. And I know that they've expressed the same desires. So exploring paperless options, that's a digitization of all of our municipal records. This is something that many towns started years ago. This is a major effort and something that would modernize our local government and something that we should be thinking about. And then, of course, oversight of the departments that would be allocated to them. And we'll go through those very quickly here. With the current structure, you've seen this slide before. This is the current structure with, Michelle and I at the top attempting to deal and provide input and guidance and support to all of the departments as they come up. There's very little to no dedicated reporting structure currently, just because of the harried nature of the work coming out of our office. The proposed structure is a bit more organized. This designates department heads would have a designated reporting structure through each of the 2 ATAs. The 4 larger departments would continue to report straight to me. Of course, I then report out to the Board of Selectmen, and again, Dr. Austin and I have a strong working relationship. So that's kind of the existing proposed structure right now, as we're putting it forward to all of you.
Thank you, Tom. The next recommendation is still the full-time mental health clinician that we are proposing for the police department. We didn't receive any extra questions on this, but just to reiterate, this is something that both our police department and the community is advocating strongly for. Mental health is a huge issue these days, and having a full-time person like this available to assist our officers and to assist people in crises would provide a huge resource to the community.
The senior planner, we heard some of this the other night. I know Victor presented it for me. I appreciate that, Victor. Thank you. I presented this as part of my overall recommendations a few weeks back. In part, we are increasing the capacity, and not in part, in large part, we are increasing the capacity to of the planning department. This is a vital position. So many of you may know we lost our longtime community planning director back at the end of December. She gave notice. She left on January 7th. And as a result, we were forced to hire a part-time contract planner to come in and assist us. This person is working on our behalf right now. It's funny, when I spoke with her name is Christine. When I spoke with her yesterday afternoon, I was telling her about this structure, this proposed structure, and she said, huh, and she kind of scoffed and said, huh, two planners, you need 4. and the point was, is she's been doing this work in Hanover as well, and there's the pace to her, who's looking at this with fresh eyes. The pace of Hingham's development efforts is unlike other towns. So this speaks to what I've been seeing and what I had been talking with Mary Savage Dunham prior to her departure about. And again, this is the proposal. So we're proposing somewhat altering the existing community planning director's position to allow for larger planning initiative thought and engagement, while adding a senior planner that would focus on supporting the planning board directly. That leaves a total net increase request, a total net additional request of $63,403. That number is attained by lowering the community planning director's salary from what it was last year, by removing the oversight of all of the second floor departments, and increasing the senior planner salary from the original ATA recommendation. So we come to a net request of $63,403.
The next one is the transfer station heavy equipment operator. We received a couple questions relating to overtime, as well as how much of this request is related to COVID and the pandemic. So in speaking with Randy Sylvester, our DPW superintendent, he estimates that we might save up to $10,000 in overtime, because right now, basically, the operations at the transfer station and the growth that we've seen in town has outpaced the current team that we've got in place there. His crew is having to do a lot of things on overtime just to keep up with the regular work at the transfer station. And one of the examples he cited the other day was having to clean up the site after hours to avoid state violations. Before the pandemic started, he was seeing 7,000 vehicle trips had creeped up to about 9,000 per week. But during the pandemic, that 9,000 is holding pretty steady, and then he's seeing peaks of over 11,000 per week. So this was needed before the pandemic. They are requesting 2 positions. We're recommending 1 this year. So he does see a need for more, but if this makes it through the budget process this evening, then we will put this person in place and reevaluate the operations there going forward. The next one's the field maintenance program, and I think Mark Thorell is with us tonight. This recommendation, the question was whether this was a one-time infusion of money or if it will be a regular annual expense. And the answer is this is an annual expense. This is supposed to be a more appropriately funded and sized maintenance program for all of our fields around town that are operated by the Rec Commission, the Board of Selectmen, and the school department. This was one of the first recommendations from the field and court study that Wesson and Sampson concluded with us not too long ago. And that was to talk about centralizing both our scheduling and permitting process, as well as putting maintenance all under one roof so that we can adequately take care of our outdoor facilities before we think about making some larger capital investments in them in the future. So this request of $241,180 will be an annual expense, and I know Mark's on the line in case there are any more detailed questions about that.
So the communications consultant, this is a bit of a rethink from what we had presented last year and discussed with all of you the year before, I believe. Last year we presented as a PIO, a public information officer. We rethought this during the MBTA's attempted or thought the considered closure of the Green Bush line and the ferry terminal. And what we saw during that effort was a communications consultant was employed to communicate with the public about the effort on that issue. And it was seamless, it was easy to use, very professionally done. And we thought that might be exactly really what we needed. And we reached out to try to get an estimated cost for our annual needs across all sectors. And the quote came back at $35,000, which is about half of our FTE costs, and doesn't come with any benefits. And it comes with the added benefit of being able to alter the contract in any given year, depending on the need, whether we find that we're contracted for too many services and we can reduce it, or if we need to tweak it and move it up, we can play with that a little bit here and there. So there's a lot of flexibility and perhaps lower costs.
And the final 2 recommendations are both proposing to address structural deficits that the current and past Board of Selectmen have asked us to look at doing. So the first is legal services, and in both cases, in legal services and snow and ice, we're proposing funding them at 80% of the 5-year average. You can see from the charts that we've been struggling to keep up with the expenditures, although we have tried to put some measures in place to control them as best we can, employing things like office hours with 2 of our council, And we are taking advantage of any reimbursements that we can do, both from CARES Act for COVID-related legal expenses, for the enterprise fund for water expenses, but some legal expenses continue to be out of our control. Snow and ice is 100% out of our control. There are obviously some fluke years like Snowmageddon in 2015, very low snowfall in 2012, but we're still recommending the same. Let's try to fund it at 80% of the 5-year average so that we can budget more appropriately for these two items. Those are the last two, Tom.
Yep. Thank you, Michelle. Bob, that's our presentation. Those are the additional requests. We can do our best to answer any other questions that anyone may have.
Well, I know I asked Julie to prepare some comments because if there's an ACEs on the municipal budget side, it's Julie and myself, and I thought Julie would be a great spokesman for the overall presentation of these additional requests. So I think I'd like to turn the floor over to Julie now, and then after that, we'll open it up for discussion. I'd like to talk about the procedure we should follow with respect to these 8 requests, and then how we get to vote. So Julie, why don't you go ahead?
Okay, thanks, Bob. So I'd like to speak to you tonight about the municipal additional requests and why I support all of these requests in total. The town administrator has put together a budget request in addition to level services that tackles the immediate needs of the town. It doesn't represent the totality of what department heads on the town side actually need, but the town administrator's request is of immediate needs while still being mindful of the town's financial situation. And like we consider the great need this year for the school department and their good faith and requesting what is absolutely necessary, I consider the town administrator's request to be equally deserving and in good faith. First, I'd like to speak quickly to the budget vote hearings we've had in the past. In usual years, over the past 10 years, more or less, I can speak over the last 4 years. But when AdCom has its final hearing and vote on the budget, we see the proposed budget, which offers funding for level services across all budgets. And then there would usually be a couple of $100,000 left. And then we would find budgets to plug that money back into departments, the schools, some capital, maybe a couple of municipal requests. So with that approach, year after year, the town has been able to spend within its means with the constraints of Prop 2.5 and whatever new growth happened. But over time, while the town and its need for services grew, this approach has left both the municipal and school budgets in need. Lean running departments can have a detrimental effect, as we've seen in the schools as they've grappled with how to educate students in a pandemic, and with the overload of work and hours on the town side as well. So you just heard from Tom and Michelle about their requests. These additional requests and the totality of our budget requests that we're dealing with tonight cost smaller dollars compared to the possibility of a much larger impact, both in function and cost savings. So for the Assistant Town Administrator for Finance, there is a need now for a deeper investigation and planning of our finances. And I would like to add that the town has benefited from free financial expertise from some dedicated volunteers. I'll probably get in trouble by forgetting people, but I would like to specifically cite the contributions of our former AdCom members, Jim Taylor and John Asher, for their detailed and important work on our modeling programs. And then, of course, we've benefited for many years from the hard work and contributions from Mary Power. And to have this function of financial planning within Town Hall, I think will have an outsized financial and functionality impact. For the mental health clinician for the police department, it's a vital position to address the types of calls that don't fit the classic use of police force. And it's a need that people have identified in our community. And as for financial impact, we're going to spend less overtime on the police budget because the casework for these types of cases would be handled by this mental health clinician, and it would free up officers. That's a possibility. The senior planner, the community planning department needs to be correctly staffed to handle its workload, and a lack in staffing will ripple out and affect not only the smaller projects, but the big projects which the town needs to gain revenue from new growth. And for the public works employee, plain and simple, the transfer station operations have outpaced staffing. For field maintenance, the townwide field study report was an important first step in the coordination and organization of our outdoor facilities, which has been a long time in coming. Now we have the opportunity to implement the first recommendation out of that study, a centralized field maintenance program, which is an annual expense to adequately take care of the outdoor facilities townwide. And I'll note that in general, as we have learned, taking care of what we currently own in this town can limit the need for more expensive future intervention and replacement costs. I think the communications consultant is a smart way to get this function done without adding a full-time employee position. What we've learned from this past year is that it is important to keep residents updated and informed on a consistent basis, especially in the case of emergencies. For legal and snow and ice, these are continually underfunded budgets, as you've seen. And for many years, the requests have been made to properly, or make an attempt at properly fund the budget and reflect what the true costs are. And we haven't been getting anywhere with that. And then finally, with capital outlay, we have an opportunity to continue to dig out of sort of backlog needs in the capital outlay budget. So in closing, the town has grown, the budget and services offered have grown, the responsibilities of employees have grown. At the end of calendar year 2020, Tom Mayo circulated a New Year's message of thanks. And he listed 34 important accomplishments made by the town during the year, which, as we know, more than 3/4 of 2020 included a pandemic. So in addition to pivoting to deal with the pandemic in the form of health and safety protocols, setting up testing, setting up vaccination capability, reimagining how to run the town functions and get all the volunteer boards going by Zoom, figuring out how to safely hold a town meeting. We held 4 elections plus early voting. The town had to coordinate reimbursements for nearly $3 million in CARES and FEMA funds. These are just naming a few of these COVID changes, but also at the same time, the town was also able to purchase a multi-community water system, had to design and staff a water department, borrow $114 million for the purchase of this water department, water system, while maintaining our AAA bond rating. We dredged the harbor, we advanced a new master plan, downtown plan, climate planning, and a new housing plan, as well as completed a study of the outdoor athletic facilities. We purchased 335 Lincoln Street as the first step in building a new North Fire Station, police headquarters, and improved senior center. The town created and adhered to a fiscal year 21 financial management plan that coordinated the Board of Selectmen, Advisory Committee, and School Committee to manage the budget through the pandemic. The town finished and opened a new bathhouse in the harbor, preserved the Hingham Hall Ferry and the Greenbush commuter rail from proposed cuts, issued 4,600 building department permits, had over 23,000 calls from the police and over 4,000 calls for the fire station. And that's not the whole list, okay? But I just wanted to tell you that there's much more that the town was able to complete. We have some terrific employees out there who have worked very hard and they're exhausted. So, thank you.
Thanks, Julie. And one of our financial resources is Dave Anderson, who I know has been standing by all night.
See, I forgot somebody. Dave, I was talking talking about like past, well,
I know you were talking about graduates of the AdCom. Would people like to have Dave put up the forecast that I believe I sent out today, but and it's this part of the meeting that Dave usually is critical about, because we're shifting around additional requests to come to a number within a budget. We're not quite in that position this year. I'd like to think that we had a path forward somehow to vote on all of the additional requests together, but I haven't thought of a way to do that. So I think, so there we go. Dave, you want to explain what we're looking at?
Okay. Right. So you guys hopefully see this page here. What this will look familiar at the top. This is basically just the forecast that we just walked through, and you'll see actually at the moment what this represents, because this year these budgets, while they were calling them additional requests, they were actually, as I think everybody's familiar, they were already included in the Article 6. I mean, I can strip it out and show you where we are. But in a nutshell, just quickly to reorient folks as we talk about this, getting to Victor's earlier question, let's just do a quick flyby on the fund balance again, as Victor raised the question. So here's what the numbers Sue spoke to. This is the money coming out of fund balance expressly for one-time items. Then we have the two tranches of the ESSER of the ESSER funding, Elementary Secondary School Emergency Recovery Fund, which total $1.37 million, $1.38 million. And then here's the American Rescue Act of the 1.2, which gets us to the basically $5 million of quote unquote one-time funding. So coming back here, I broke out those components a little bit just for the purposes of tonight's discussion to show you the breakout and where this goes. Capital, I know we're going to get to in a second, but so then I did also lay out then in the order of priority from Tom, just the costs associated with the additional requests. And if we want to make adjustments, we can do that and it'll flow through. But unlike previous years, when we make adjustments this year, we will actually be making kind of deductions or increasing surplus where there is none now, just because of the way the budget is constructed this year. So I don't know where you want to go from here, Bob, if you want to have a discussion about each line item or where.
I think if you could put up the priority chart of Tom's requests and the amounts, Dave. I thought I saw it a moment ago.
Dave, you have to unshare and then change it and then share it.
Oh, okay, hang on. Bear with me. This is the hardest part of the job.
Yes, it is.
Give me 1 second.
Michelle's dying to do this.
All right.
Yeah, she's starting to twitch.
Okay, how's that? Do you see it now?
Not yet.
Really? What do you see right now?
It
Dave
says
Anderson
you
has
start.
started screen sharing.
It says you started screen sharing.
That's all. It says.
Double click on it.
Two screens.
Yeah. All right. You know what? Let me do this. I do. I'm probably making my own problems here. Hang on 1 second. All right, I'm going to stop the share and start again. At least there's only 46 people watching me do this.
Well, you've got a television audience at home.
Thanks, Bob. All right.
There you go.
You see it now?
Yep.
All right, great.
You've got to go left.
Left. Hold on, let me just make it smaller.
I'm only seeing half of the, keep going. There, all right, the whole thing is there now. I think we probably need to discuss these one at a time. And then vote on them one at a time. We can either vote at the end of the original discussion, or we can go through the whole discussion and then vote. People have a viewpoint on that one way or the other?
Makes sense to go through them all so we hear each other's views on the whole package.
Okay, so we'll have our discussion on all of them, and then we will come to vote. So I think on the Assistant Town Administrator that, Andy, that's part of your general government article on the Selectmen.
Yes.
Did you have further comments as the liaison?
Libby raised a question about looking at so-called benchmark towns. And if I could take 3 minutes, I'd like to clear that up. The term benchmark towns, as we use it, is really a misnomer. A benchmark is a standard or a point of reference against which things may be compared or assessed or measured. We use the term benchmark incorrectly because we haven't come up with a better term, and it's an easy one to remember. But the genesis of this list of 20 towns is from the work of the Personnel Board many years ago. I think it was probably Nelson Ross who generated it. And what it was a collection of data by a survey of a representative sample of towns to help the Personnel Board make a determination about appropriate salaries or wages for different positions. You know, so for example, if you're going to hire your first heavy equipment operator, you would ask what the going rate is for a reasonably competent heavy equipment operator. You obviously don't want the maestro of the field, but you also don't want one who is still learning how to operate the equipment. And so I say you want a reasonably competent and experienced one. And then if you have no experience, you look at the going rate, you determine the going rate by looking at what other towns are paying. You can't survey all towns, so you try and find a representative sample that gives you some range in all likelihood. And you have to keep in mind two things at this point. One is all towns are looking for the same thing, namely a reasonably competent and experienced heavy equipment operator. Nobody's looking for the best one on the planet, unless maybe you're Weston, and maybe your Weston says we're special, we want all our employees to have master's degrees, regardless of whether that's important for the jobs or not. So you may say Weston pays twice what everybody else pays for heavy equipment operators. You might throw that out as an outlier, but you're still going to find a range because of the particular circumstances of the supply and demand at the time a particular town is hiring. So you find a range, and Hingham traditionally has looked to be in the middle of the range. You don't want to be at the bottom because the other rule, is that as people tend in large measure to establish their own salaries. So if all the employees, for example, are getting $10 an hour and work a 40-hour week, and you can convince a new employee to come on the job at 8 hours an hour for a 40-hour week, within a very short period of time, that new employee is going to figure out how underpaid he or she is, and you're going to end up getting 32 hours of work during the 40-hour week. When the personnel people say people tend to set their own wages, that's what they mean. So Hingham's never been interested in looking at the bottom. And they're not looking at to be the Weston with the demand for master's degrees. They look to be in the middle. And that's how and why Hingham has looked at this survey of comparable towns. Now, unfortunately, that survey of not comparable towns, that's my misnomer, a survey of representative towns, because you can't look at all. But unfortunately now it's become called a benchmark, which suggests there's something against which you measure yourself, and if you don't meet it, you're falling below some standard, which is not accurate. And unfortunately now, every time Hingham tries to do something, somebody will say, well, how do we compare with the quote benchmark towns? And the comparison breaks down when you're trying to apply this to a lot of things, most particularly things that are not salaries or wages. So for example, to Libby's question, if you are going to look at a sample of representative towns, you would have to know something about looking at towns that have comparable political and organizational structures as Hingham. Do they have 3, 5, or 7 members of a select board? Is their organizational structure similar? You want towns with comparable populations, comparable budgets, comparable number of employees, a comparable range and level of services. None of those factors go into the list of towns that a personnel board will put together to get a sample, if you will, to determine what the appropriate salary is for a heavy equipment operator. So I think, with due respect to Libby, and I hate to say this when she's not here, but you cannot look at the list of 20 towns and say that gives you any information or help in making your decision whether the town of Hingham needs a second assistant town administrator. It's completely apples and oranges, and it will not work. So that's my long-winded answer to Libby's question. With that being said, I only have one other thing to say, that if you look at the table of organizations as things currently stand, I don't want to say it's almost laughable, but frankly, it's almost laughable. I mean, you have 21 or 22 departments reporting to one person and that person's assistant, and that makes no sense to anyone. The people at the top, the select board, as we will call them, starting July 1, are very supportive of this article, is my understanding, and they know better than anyone how hard our 2 people currently work, and B, how great the need is. So, I mean, to me, this is a no-brainer that the town definitely needs and can benefit from this second ATA position. So I wholeheartedly support and recommend it. Thank you.
Dave.
Yeah, I would just echo Andy's comments. I can't even begin to tell you, I can't even begin to estimate the amount of time. I'll just take one example of Mary Power and think about the number of things I've been involved with tangentially that she's worked on at a level that is unbelievable. And this is to take nothing away from Tom and Michelle and Sue and everybody else in the department, but the notion that either a select board member should be expected to be able to do that on a regular basis, or that B, in her absence, the town should magically find the resources to pick up the slack. Neither is credible or reasonable. And I think this position is long overdue. And I think it's even more timely given what some of us anticipate, the next year holds in terms of planning and thoughtfulness. So I couldn't endorse this more strongly.
George.
Yeah, Bob, thank you. Really just a comment for Tom. I mean, I agree wholeheartedly with Andy and with Dave that, just from a sheer management span of control perspective, the current organization is way out of whack. And I would support adding a second assistant town manager. Where I guess raised my question is it seems to me we're looking for a financial analyst and a management person. And I guess that new management person is going to do both jobs, or maybe Michelle and this new person and Tom are also going to do the financial analysis information. But it really seems like what we're looking for, almost in addition to this position, is an analyst at some point.
Yes, that for me, George, is that what you said?
Yeah, I think so, Tom. I mean, it's just a comment. I agree with what you're saying, but I do see a need for an analyst here. And I wonder if the new person or the combination of you, Michelle, and the new person is going to be able to do the analytical type work that we need in addition to doing the managerial and all the other type things.
Bob, do you mind if I answer?
Oh, please go ahead, Tom.
Thank you, George. It's a good point. So this is a common structure when municipalities go the 2 ATA route, or in some towns deputy and then 2 ATA routes. There's often operations and a financial or ATA finance, and the idea is that they're looking at financial analytics and long range planning. And if you remember the org chart that we laid out, it's in essence the finance team that would be reporting to the ATA of finance. So it's a few non-public facing departments, but it's really the bulk of the work in terms of management would be in communicating and coordinating with the accounting office, the treasurer's office, and the assessing office. And it's those departments that are setting the long-range planning goals and analyzing financial analytics that will inform our budgeting process every year.
All right, thank you.
Thanks,
You're
Tom.
welcome.
Any other questions or comments from members of the advisory committee? Mary, does anybody on your board want to have anything to say about this?
I don't think I do, Bob. I know both Joe and Bill are on the line. I don't know if either of them had anything to add.
Thank Mary, this is Joe. And I fully support this. Everyone knows that your departure is coming up, and we will need an infrastructure to do a lot of the financial work that you've been doing. But it's a lot more than that. It's really the organizational structure that's needed for the municipal side so that all the departments function properly. And one of the things that the school committee has pointed out to us, and I think Carlos was really the most vocal, is we need someone focused on getting grants for the towns. And that's one of the functions, one of the many functions that this structure will facilitate. So I absolutely support, encourage, and I'm hoping that AdCom will be supporting this as well. Thank you.
Joe? Not seeing any other hands. I don't know if anyone from the school committee wants to weigh in on this. Carlos De Silva says thank you.
Bob, I think Carlos has his hand up.
Carlos, do you want to speak?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, thank you. Thank every single one of you on the AdCom, ACES, Board of Selectmen, school committee as a whole. Speaking as a member of the school committee and also as a citizen, I really appreciate everything that's taking place here. And thank you, Selectman Fisher, for bringing it up. I think it is imperative that we take advantage of the position that I have mentioned years after years, grant writer, right? If we are to consider, and by the way, I'm in full support of the ATA for finances. But when we are posting that position, I would respectfully ask, Mr. Mayor, that you consider adding that one of the roles of that individual would be to write grants or even manage grants, right? We can actually bring in volunteers to write grants. There is plenty of free money out there, and we ought to take advantage of that. And one of the greatest examples that have utilized throughout Plymouth County is the fact that we applied for dredging. I mean, not me, I don't want to take the credit for, but our harbor master applied for money for dredging we got over $1.5 million. That's imperative. That's unbelievable. Okay, so let's take advantage of that. Let's make sure that when we are writing that description for the position, that we add that one of the roles, it is to write grants. And, you know, and hopefully the money will come to the different departments. So I am in full support of the full budget, and I want to thank every single one of you, and including and especially my fellow school committee members. Thank you.
Thank you, Carlos. I am not seeing any other school committee hands. Is there any member of the general public or another town board? Oh, Evan.
But so we're going to do each one of these and have a discussion?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, I would agree. I think Tom and Michelle laid out a really compelling case for not only this role, but a number of the other ones there. So, you know, I'm fully supportive and agree with George's comment that the span of control on 24 different town departments is just unmanageable based on the workload that they both have. So I think it's smart.
Thank you. Any member of another town board or member of the general public? Sue, are you raising your hand?
Yes, I am. Sorry. Snicker says hi. All I want to do is echo what everybody has said. As one of the finance team's department, I echo that another ATA would be enormous help. Tom and Michelle are stretched to the limit, trying to get into and see them, whether it's Zoom or on the phone. It's very difficult. They are stretched out beyond their capabilities, and I think another ATA would benefit the town an awful lot. Thank you.
Thank you, Sue. And thanks for all you do. We couldn't do this without you.
Anytime.
Any other members of a town board or the general public that have a question or a comment on the second assistant town administrator? I'm not seeing any hands, so I think we can proceed to our discussion on the second additional request, which is the full-time mental health clinician for the police. And I think, Dave Aline, that you are the liaison to that.
Yes, I am, and I fully support this position. It is, it's not just a social worker, it's a social worker who's trained to work with police and their needs. So it's not more general than that. And it's someone who could actually go with police officers when they are responding to calls that likely involve mental health situations. In addition, they could also assist police who are dealing with difficult situations themselves. So, you know, think about police officers, for example, right now in Boulder, Colorado. So this is an important resource. The amount of time the police, you know, it's the reality. We now expect the schools to do a lot of mental health work. We expect the police to do a lot of mental health work. And so I think this position is just critical to the continued professionalism and the continued work of the police department.
Thank you. Other members of advisory have questions or comments? I am not seeing any hands raised. Members of other boards of the town or members of the general public? Bill Ramsey, go ahead.
Good evening, everybody. I actually attended the appointment today of our two new lieutenants on the police department, and coincidentally enough, to this request, 3 police officers came up to me after the ceremony and discussed a situation that they dealt with just a few nights ago, where a resident was exhibiting some mental health issues, and there was an issue of overindulging in alcohol. And the officers mentioned to me how that situation where they come across a situation that's not an arrestable offense, but an individual just needs help. And they mentioned how this position would help them in dealing with those type of situations. So just want to echo my support for this much needed position.
Thank you, Bill. Others, town board members or members of the general public? I'm not seeing any hands raised, so I think we can proceed to the next additional request, which is the full-time senior planner. And I think you're the liaison, Victor?
Yes, and I would agree wholeheartedly with the discussion that the presentation that Tom and Michelle made on this item. The community planning department needs support. The reorganization makes a lot of sense. There are many projects coming down the pike, and the planning board needs the additional help staffing and providing assistance. So I do support this request.
Other members of AdCom, questions or comments? I'm not seeing any hands. Other members of town boards, questions or comments? Not seeing any hands. And any members of the general public that have a question or comment on that? Not seeing any hands. So I think we can go on to the full-time transfer station heavy equipment operator. And Nancy, is that yours?
That's mine. And I fully support this. The transfer station usage since the beginning of COVID, so just over the past year, has increased over 30%. And that has resulted in a tremendous amount of overtime by the staff down at the transfer station. So this is an expense that will actually mitigate expenses.
Thank you, Nancy. Any questions or comments from, yes, Victor?
So Nancy, following up then on the overtime, as I understood the chart, and maybe I'm not understanding it, the overtime savings would be about $10,000 compared to the salary in what, 51 plus whatever benefits. So is it really a good deal to have the new position rather than continue with overtime?
I think so from a standpoint. Let me look at my notes from the conversations with Randy, but yes, because there is a tremendous amount of work that, hold on one second. That is being taken on with the increase in the transfer station. It's not just the increase of the work that's done there. It's the towing that they're doing back and forth to Plymouth is taking up a lot of time. I'd have to look at the actual numbers, Victor, on the, but I had notes from Randy. I thought it was higher than $10,000, but let me look at that while we can move on.
So is Randy's point then also that there's work that's just not getting done because of the lack of staffing, so that it isn't being done in overtime, it's just not being done?
No, I mean, they're doing all the work that needs to be done, but they're doing it at just an increased pace and rate and with overtime dollars. I mean, I didn't get the impression that things aren't getting done.
As I understood it, I thought Randy thought that he really needed 2 more people. And that
If you look at the chart, yeah, he got unfilled positions.
And a question I had was whether the new transfer station fees were going to require additional resources to be expended by Randy's department, either at the transfer station or elsewhere. We haven't really seen that on AdCom. Maybe at some point the Selectmen could, Tom Mayo could comment on that.
Sure. Yep. Did you want me to, Bob?
Yeah, if you could help us on that, Tom, please.
Sure, absolutely. So I did speak with Randy about this, and it's the right question, Victor. I think one of the differences when we think of overtime community-wide, we often think about the police and fire. Remember, a lot of their overtime is mandatory. So we can't go under a certain number of firefighters or under a certain number of police officers. When someone calls in sick for the police department or for the fire department, they're mandatory. There are mandatory rules that will backfill those jobs so that overtime has to be filled. Over at the transfer station, if there's work not getting done or that needs to be done and there's no time to do it other than on overtime, that very much depends on the what is there, 5, I think, folks that are assigned to that facility and their availability to work the overtime shifts in order to get that work done. They do work very hard to get the minimal work done that needs to be done so that the place operates effectively and efficiently. But there are things that Randy would be able to do with a proper staffing. And one of the reasons I recommended one HEO before recommending the full 2 that he recommended is I wanted to see both if the growth of the number of trips at the station continue to trend the way they have been, and 2, to evaluate more fully the effect of one more person before we actually went out and hired both. I got a feeling that that the need will plateau here. I do think it's up. It's been on a very high trajectory for a long time, which is, we're up over 9,000 daily trips with the peaks of 11.5 during the pandemic. So, are we around 10,000 daily trips? Yes. Are we staffed for that? No, we're staffed for back what it was when it was 7,000. And therein lies the problem, is trying to get everybody through in the allotted time and getting the work done that, requires, the bailing and the like. I think Randy thinks that we would be able to obviously sufficiently do that with 2 additional positions. I think we could do it with 1 for a year and see how that goes. But that's my recommendation and the reasons for it.
Yeah, and Victor, I have in my notes that the overtime was upwards of $30,000, and as Tom just said, that there was an original request for 2, and so this is down from that for 1. So this is to compensate for the overtime as well as the additional workload.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Any other questions or comments from members of the AdCom? Oh, Brenda, go ahead, please.
My memory of one of Randy's discussions about raising the fees at the transfer station is that in order to actually collect that money, they will need somebody manning the scale pretty consistently, which already has increased. But in order to bring in that 150,000, there will need to be somebody manning that scale. Another person is needed for that.
Yeah, that's not on heavy equipment.
Other questions or comments from members of the AdCom? Comments or questions from other town boards? Not seeing any hands. Comments or questions from members of the general public? Not seeing any hands on that either. Okay, so we go on to the field maintenance program. I think that's Dave Anderson.
Yeah, that's right, Bob. Yeah, I think Tom did a nice job summarizing it, and I've spoken with Mark about this. I think, obviously, the value of the town's recreation assets in terms of the fields is significant, and the effort, frankly, in terms of a serious concerted effort to maintain those fields up to, even as Mark describes it to me, even to kind of a midpoint of a reasonable standard for athletic field maintenance is really kind of non-existent at this stage. And this is intended to remedy that based on the Weston and Sampson report. So I think this is a critical first step. I think obviously it serves a broad constituency in town of parents, both themselves using the facilities and then also their kids. And I think it's a strong and important recommendation that should be considered strongly.
Other questions or comments from members of AdCom? Victor?
So, Dave, if this were a normal year and we weren't using large amounts of fund balance and one-time payment, how would we be paying for this one? And we're going to see 270,000 a year or whatever, 240, whatever it is. You know, so I guess that's one question. And the other is, so what is done regularly if we don't implement this, at least this year? What are the fields unusable? Are they, who takes care of them normally?
Yeah, I had to disconnect my other screen with my notes. Let me let Mark speak to you, and then I can certainly pick up where he leaves off. Mark, do you mind?
Sure. Hi, Victor. Good question. So what's being now is less than acceptable level. So we're, in terms of the rec department and selectmen fields, we're not even doing basic fertilization program. And what the town is paying for is they do provide DPW a budget, which covers grass cutting, weed whacking, and trash pickup. But those tasks are not really turf maintenance tasks. And to properly take care of athletic fields, you need to have a turf maintenance program, which includes fertilizing, lime, core aerating, deep tine aerating, top dressing, slice seeding, that whole package. We also are not taking care of infields like we should be. And I've heard many youth sports leagues tell me that they're unable to play games because of poor drainage or because they just don't have a acceptable level of field. Hingham Youth Soccer at some levels are playing home games in Cohasset. So yeah, as a town, we are not doing a good job of taking care of our assets of athletic fields.
And Victor, on the expense side, and Mark can correct me if I'm wrong, but my recollection is that there are 4 seasonal employees included in this, and then obviously some, I think also, Paul and Mark, if I remember correctly, a portion of this is also going to be outsourced on an annual basis to a third-party contractor. Is that right?
Correct. The strategy of this budget was to outsource as much of the turf maintenance task as possible. So we're outsourcing everything from fertilizing, lime, all the aeration, even infield openings, in townwide irrigation contract. So the strategy is to outsource it all, which provides the town financial flexibility, where if we need to pivot in the future, we have a little bit more flexibility when we're outsourcing these tasks. The only task we couldn't outsource, because it's a daily task, is infield grooming. And that is where the budget request for payroll comes in. Most of that would go strictly to infields and really being a daily task that needs to be done constantly. That's why that payroll is there, is to handle that daily task.
And they're seasonal, right, Mark?
Correct.
And do you anticipate that, I know that the plan is to do this every year. Do you anticipate that it is necessary every year? I mean, given if budget constraints would suggest otherwise?
Yeah, I mean, if the town wants to protect its assets and have quality fields, this would be a game plan that should be implemented every single year.
George Stanis?
Yeah, Mark or Dave, is the 241,180 net of user fees for these fields, for playing on these fields?
So the total budget is actually 381,000. So the 241 is offset by $140,000. Most of that coming from user fees.
And are the user fees that we charge comparable to benchmark towns? Andy, don't bite me on this one, but.
He's got his hand up, George. He's going to speak next.
I hesitated to go there, but.
It's if you're asking what the going rate is, it's a fair question to look at comparable towns.
Let me rephrase it then, Andy.
No, you're okay, George.
All right, thank you.
I actually did a survey with the range of towns that Hingham compares itself to. And I've talked to the majority of all the presidents of youth sports, and they're even willing to pay a little bit more in user fees, seeing that the town, if the town steps up and is able to pay the $241,000 to make this budget work, they're even in agreement to even step up further and pay a little bit more in user fee and be past the midpoint of the range of towns and be a little bit past even the midpoint of what the average user fee is for youth sports.
Thank you.
Andy, go ahead. You're on mute.
Mark, to what extent would you be doing work on the school fields?
So yeah, this is a town-wide athletic turf maintenance plan. So this plan is across all three entities: Selectmen, Recreation, and School Department.
So there is a revolving account for field use with a balance of $190,000 in it, and I believe that the school committee, and somebody can check me if I'm wrong, also has a line item budget for athletic fields. So there might be some funds there, Victor, to pick up.
240. Okay.
Other members of advisory? George and Andy, you both still have your hands up.
All right.
Bill Ramsey, go ahead.
Thank you. I had the good fortune of growing up in town and playing sports on many of these fields, and now I have the pleasure of being very involved in coaching my 3 children. And the need for this is significant. We only have a couple of good grass fields in town. I would submit to you that probably Carlson, it's probably Lynch, and then some soccer fields down the high school area. And because those fields are in good condition, they just get massive amounts of use during the times when we can get on them. And unfortunately, we have nice weather out today and this past week, but usually we can't even get on these fields because, as Mark said earlier, they're wet until maybe late April or early May, because we're going to damage them. I think under this plan, we can revitalize those fields in the off season, in the fall, and we can also work on bringing to life some other fields in town that aren't used because they're in such bad condition. For example, there's a baseball diamond in the Bradley Woods playground area that's never used. There's a baseball diamond on Hull Street that's never used. Powers Field needs to see some repair. I think under this plan, and that Mark can have this team of maintenance workers work on those fields, so that when Little League and other sports teams need to use alternative fields to rest the primary fields, they'll be able to do it. And as Dave put out, it affects a broad base of our community. I would submit to you there are thousands of children that play youth sports in this town, and it's a major focus of our community. So I would encourage you to support this. I think it's well worth it.
Thanks, Bill. Carlos De Silva.
Thank you, Chairman Bob. And thank you, Mark, for the great work that you've been doing at the rec department. I just wanted to say that as the chairman of the facilities and capital facilities, we do appreciate that, there is a huge effort to address all the fields and everything, but I am actually concerned because how is this overlap with the Department of Public Works? At the present moment, they do take care of the fields. Are you engaged with the Department of Public Works? Because initially they are the one in charge of, mowing the lawns and so on and so forth. At one point, I was involved not only as a member of the school committee, but also a member of the soccer boosters, coordinating field lining and so on and so forth, and also a member of the Hingham Youth Soccer. So, being involved out there, I know that takes a huge effort to maintain the fields and, coordinating that, you go and mow the lawn, before we are able to field, do the lines, all the field lining is done by volunteers. Often, by the time we get to play the games, because there was not enough coordination, the lawn was mowed after we did the lines. So how are you playing, what role are you playing as a RAC into this? Are you removing the Department of Public Works from this role of mowing the lawn?
Thanks, Carlos. Oh, sorry, Bob.
Go ahead, Mike.
Thanks, Carlos. Actually, this doesn't affect the Department of Public Works at all. Randy's crew, they're still gonna cut all the grass, do all the weed whacking, and all the trash removal. These turf maintenance tasks are not being performed by the DPW, so this doesn't affect Randy or have any union issues at all.
Okay. Mary Power.
Good evening, Bob. Thank you. I just wanted to respond to the comments that Victor and Andy were making relative to money that already exists in some budgets and specifically the school budget. Michelle Monsegur and Mark can probably just confirm this or correct if I'm incorrect. But essentially right now, if you look in the town, within the school budget, within Public Works, within a few other places, you have money that's devoted to field maintenance. And I think it's about, Michelle, I'm thinking $170,000 kind of in all. Does that, but the bottom line is, the bottom line is that when Weston and Sampson looked and they said, the money in the school budget that's being dedicated to fields, it's just not enough. So the $241,000 request that you see here is for additional work. And so I just want to point out that there isn't another source of money in a school budget. That money will continue to be used towards maintaining these fields. The DPW work, as Mark says, will continue. These are the incremental dollars associated with the maintenance gap that Weston and Sampson has identified. Thank you.
Dave Elaine.
It just seems to me that we paid money to have this field study done. I think that was CPC funding. We got a lot of recommendations for how to improve the fields, but the first step was this issue of we had to be able to maintain them. And it certainly wouldn't, if we can't afford on a yearly basis to maintain the fields, then we should give up. I mean, why we're not going to improve something unless we can maintain it. And so it seems to me this is an important, I almost look at it as if we can't do this, then the rest of that study was money thrown over the, I don't know, over the field or something. Because this is the first step of having the fields work better, but also be maintained and taken care of. So it seems to me it is important for all the reasons that have been mentioned.
Alan?
I just didn't hear or understand the answer to the, I guess, the issue of coordination. I don't remember from the presentation. So who's actually doing the additional work and how does it get coordinated with the other folks that are doing work that falls under the umbrella of field maintenance? Thanks.
Back to you, Mark.
Sure, thanks, Alan. 90% of the work would be contracted out. So I would work with the town's procurement officer. We would put out either an RFP or an IFB and put it out to bid for companies that specialize solely in athletic fields and in infield openings. And really, it would be myself as the point person. I've got a strong working relationship with Jim Quattromoni, the AD of the high school, and Katie Hartman, who's in charge of a lot of the public school fields as well. So the three of us would be working as a team in coordination, but I would be the point person on the contracts.
So, I mean, that was part of the recommendation, as I recall, was doing all the coordination through the rec department of all that and taking the scheduling and of the use and all that. Is that included in this, or is there a staff number in that?
Yeah, the scheduling and the permitting is part, it's not part of this exact recommendation because this is about the turf maintenance budget. But yeah, wrapped into it is the rec department would do all the scheduling and permitting townwide on all the fields. The AD at the high school would simply black out whatever he needs for all the school sports. And I know this plan only works if the AD and Katie Hartman are happy. And so I would make sure that the schools get everything they need and then some. So even if they, you know, have some rain out dates and need to rearrange the schedule, youth sports and adult sports are just going to have to understand that the public school student athletes come first and they'll get bounced. So yeah, the rec department would do the scheduling and the permitting working along with the schools, but it would be the one clearinghouse for scheduling and permitting as well.
And coordinating with the DPW on
right
the issue of Carlos brought up.
Yeah, I talk to Randy frequently, but yeah, Randy's crew is going to continue doing what they've always done with the grass cutting and the weed whacking. So this doesn't really affect what Randy's crew has done and will be doing.
Okay, thanks.
Thanks, Alan. Thanks, Mark. Ray Estes?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ray Estes, 92 Fort Hill Street, speaking on behalf of the Hingham Sports Partnership. So I had the privilege of being involved in the field study working group with Mark, and we spent a number of months working on what turned out to be a 90-page field study. And for those of you who haven't had the opportunity to read it, I'm happy to send you the PDF. It's a terrific report and includes many recommendations. This is just the first, and as Mark indicated, we're just kind of breaking the surface on what might be possible to improve on our assets. And that's what our fields really are. And Dave spoke to it, Julie spoke to it very eloquently about our assets. And one of the things that has come up years and years and years is that we don't do a very good job of maintaining our assets. And our fields are part of their assets, just like buildings in this town. And if we don't take care of our assets, they will deteriorate even worse than they are now. And we have an opportunity now to improve and maintain valuable assets that thousands and thousands of community members use, whether they're 75 years old or they're 6 years old. Thousands of folks use these fields on a daily basis, year-round, and we just have not done a good job of maintaining them. We have not allocated the manpower. We've not allocated the resources over the years. And this study, which was commissioned by the rec department and funded with CPC dollars last year, is a step in the right direction to start to maintain our assets, our athletic assets. And I think this is short money that will go a long way. We cannot continue to kick the can down the road and risk further deterioration of these valuable athletic assets. I would request that the advisory committee support this additional request and look forward to pursuing additional recommendations of this field study in the future. Thank you.
Thanks, Ray. Other questions or comments on this item, field maintenance program? I'm not seeing any hands, which brings us to the communications consultant, which is within the selectmen's budget. I think we're back to you, Andy.
I think is absolutely compelling. And the example he gave of how that he was thinking that the town needed a communications coordinator, but found that if rather than hire someone, if this was done on a contract basis, we could get the services he needs at a much lower price. I think that was right on, and I think it's hard to deny. And I wanted to mention that I don't know if anybody had a chance to look at their Hingham Journal today, but if you've seen it in the past several months, you recognize this is not a Hingham newspaper any longer. And one cannot count on the Journal to be the publicity organ, if you will, for town events and goings on. So I think it is necessary when you don't have dedicated journalists from the Journal attending selectmen's meetings and other meetings and reporting on them weekly. Right. When that doesn't occur, I think it's imperative to have somebody in the town who is making those communications, and this seems to me to be a very effective way of doing that.
Thank you. Other questions or comments from members of advisory?
Hey, Bob, can I ask one?
Hey, go ahead, Dave.
Tom, maybe this is a question for you or through Bob. I'm curious, is the 35,000 fixed or is it an estimate? And if there was, God forbid, a huge communications issue over the course of the year, is the 35,000 likely to go up on some kind of, hourly scale? I'm just curious what that overall framework looks like.
Sure. Bob, do you mind if I answer?
I'll take that, Tom.
Sure. Thank you for the question, David. So it's a not to exceed number for a contract. The contract contemplates an amount of work, a number of press releases a month or so. What we were told was those amounts are flexible. Month to month, one month you might be, only need 10 press releases. The next month you might have a need for 25. What they're trying to avoid by putting an amount of an average amount of releases into the contract is the communities that might all of a sudden decide to be sending out press releases on anything and everything and doing 200 a month. And that's what they're trying to avoid. So as long as we're not doing that, we're not going to have that problem. We would be able to manage what they refer to as crisis management as needed.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Other questions or comments from members of advisory? I'm not seeing any hands. Questions or comments from other town boards? I'm not seeing any hands. Questions or comments from members of the general public? I'm not seeing any hands. I think that brings us to item 7, which is the legal structural deficit. I think that's you too, Andy.
Well, this is a topic near and dear to my heart, obviously, given that the lawyers are always underpaid. Tom has spoken to the advisory committee in the past about his discomfort with structural deficits in the budgets, and has put a program in place to work on reducing the structural deficit by increasing the amount of the annual appropriation for this item. This is an opportunity to take a larger chunk out of that. So the original recommendation was 25,000. It now goes up to this 138. And I mean, it's just, it's the reality. So I think there's, if you consistently overspend or underspend your budgeted amount, then I think that's telling you you have to fix your budget. And since we've been consistently overspending the legal budget, I think the numbers are telling us something about an adjustment that has to be made. So I recommend it.
Thank you. Other questions or comments from advisory committee? I'm not seeing any hands. Any questions or comments from other town boards? I'm not seeing any hands. Questions or comments from members of the general public? I'm not seeing any hands. And I think that brings us to our last item, which is the snow and ice structural deficit. And George Dennis, I think that's you.
Sorry about that. I was on mute. Sorry.
There you go.
So, so much like legal services, although I guess in a slightly different vein, we have historically been underfunding snow and ice removal. Admittedly, there's some weather ambiguities that apply to this, but bottom line is that we've been underfunding snow and ice for a while. So this budget adds $63,173 to that.
So you're recommending that, George?
Oh, yes, I am recommending
Thank
that.
you. Questions or comments from other members of advisory? Questions or comments from other town boards or Victor Valtier, go ahead.
So I just have a question. I mean, I appreciate the comment on both of the structural deficits, but I mean, by paying them the way we do, we basically free up other money that's, you know, the structure, paying them the way we do, it's not subject to the 2.5 cap, right? Because we transfer them from, we've been fortunate to have the fund balance to do it, right? If we didn't, maybe we wouldn't be able to do this. But has there been any thought there? I mean, by putting them into the budget, we put stress on other items, other services that we would want to pay for that are subject to the, you know, overall revenue cap. I mean, has anyone done analysis of that?
Tom or Michelle, do you want to take that?
Sure, I'm happy to if you'd like me to. Yep. So thank you for the question, Victor. So two just quick notes that, as Michelle said earlier during our presentation, we're recommending this budget as well as legal at 80% of the 5-year average. And what we're trying to do there is a simple correction to what we know we are going to spend on and just about every year. The question, Victor, of using fund balance and its appropriateness for snow and ice, yeah, I mean, that we could absolutely continue to do that, but we are annually, knowingly going into every winter season, knowing that we're going to be deficit spending. So I think that's a concern that I've had for a long time. I'm not sure that's good fiscal management, but you know, to your point of, is fund balance the right pot for funding these expenses? I would say that it's an appropriate pot for funding overages, but to the extent we have known shortages every year, that's when it becomes problematic, and that's why I'm making the recommendation.
I mean, I appreciate that. I mean, it does put, but we do need to keep in mind that for the future override that people think may be coming, it does sort of add more pressure.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Mary Power.
Thanks, Bob. I would just add a couple of things. First of all, under Massachusetts general law, municipalities are allowed to deficit spend on snow and ice, but that's really the only category. So we are really supposed to approach budgets with an eye towards not having existing structural deficits. As we think about our legal budget and we look at the history, and again, we look at the size and complexity of the town, I think the board has been a little uncomfortable going into the year knowing that we have a structural deficit in legal because it really isn't in accordance with Massachusetts general law. I would make one other point about, addressing these structural deficits. And I think the board, Victor, kind of, talked a little bit about some of the points you were making. As we move forward and we also are thinking about an override, I know one thing that this board has talked about is potentially revising the town financial policy to maybe have some allowable use of excess unassigned fund balance. Like, for example, taking some of the turnbacks and putting them back to work into the operating budget. I think if you have these structural deficits and you have some unpredictability in how much you're going to have to lean into fund balance, it might make it a little bit more difficult to do that. So if this is something we want to do this year, and the advisory committee is looking at modifying the financial policy and, again, potentially looking at application of some excess fund balance to fund our operating budget in the future, there could also always be an opportunity to pull this back. Having said that, I think the board would personally advocate that if we were going to pull some of it back, because Massachusetts general law does allow that for snow and ice, that just feels like a more comfortable place to do that. Thank you.
Other questions or comments from members of the advisory committee or town boards or the general public? I'm not seeing any hands. So we have now completed our discussion on the 8 items. What I've heard is 8 affirmative recommendations from liaisons. I sense that there may be unanimous support for many of these, but maybe not so for all. And similar to the way we just voted all of the other budgets, I think it is open to us to do what we've done with the other budgets and with the CPC articles, to ask if anybody wants to put a hold for a separate vote on one of these items. If so, we'll have a separate vote. If there are no holds or limited holds, we'll vote the budget requests that have not been held. And I do have an enlightened self-interest in this because as the chair, I don't want to do 8 roll call votes. So, so if that is a procedure that makes sense to everybody, if it doesn't make sense and you want to do it some other way, raise your hand and we'll talk about it. I'm not seeing any hands. So let me ask, does anyone want to put a hold on item number 1, the assistant town administrator? I'm not seeing any hands or other signals. Item number 2, the mental health clinician. Does anyone want to put a hold on that? If so, raise your hand. I'm not seeing any. The senior planner, does anyone want to put a hold on that? I'm not seeing any hands. Transfer station heavy equipment operator, does anyone want to put a hold on that? I am not seeing any hands. The field maintenance program, does anyone want to put a hold on that? I am not seeing any hands. The communications consultant, does anyone want to put a hold on that? I am not seeing any hands. And the legal structural deficit, does anyone want to put a hold on that? I'm not seeing any hands. The snow and ice structural deficit. Does anyone want to put a hold on that? I'm not seeing any hands. So we will then come collectively to vote on these 8 additional requests. I would consider the recommendations of each of the liaisons to be the affirmative motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. All right, I usually go by the way people appear on the screen, but you're not on the screen, so I'll go by the list. Dave Anderson.
Aye.
George Danis.
Aye.
Evan Sheehan.
Aye.
Victor Walter.
Aye.
Alan McDonald.
Aye.
Andrew McElhaney.
Aye.
Brenda Black.
Aye.
Eveline Cooper.
Aye.
Aaron Kelly.
Aye.
George Danis.
Already voted.
You know, the names jump around.
But I'll vote again.
Chicago way.
Andy, did I already get you?
Yes.
Okay, Julie.
Yes. Aye.
Kristen.
Aye.
Nancy.
Aye.
Dave Lee.
Aye again.
Oh, all right. Again, the names are jumping around. Evan Sheehan.
Aye times 2.
Tina.
Aye.
All right, did I miss anybody?
George, that's 18-0.
I guess. I guess that's 13-0. Thank you all. And I think you can take the screen down, Dave.
We want to talk capital or
We do want to talk capital. Are you prepared to do that on the screen too?
hopefully you see that now. Do you see that now?
I do.
Okay. I mean, I can leave it here or I can stop sharing. It's up to you.
No, is this helpful for you, Daveline?
Sure. I mean, I think the capital budget that was presented earlier, my plan was just to say how it had changed. And I know the discussion keeps being around this $300,000, but actually we were told to spend $306,588 $306,588, which we did. And that makes the total capital budget $2,500,168, which is hopefully what's up there, and it is. And then I just thought we added 3 things to the capital budget that aren't on that plan that Eric gave everyone when he appeared, and I thought people might be interested in that. So, and I think that 306,588 is what takes us to a 0.
Yes.
Yeah, so.
But might as well tell us the extra items.
Okay, so for town hall, I'll start with the smallest. We added $5,000 to the town hall budget for the water hydration, which we thought, particularly in COVID times, was a good expenditure. Our big expenditure was for DPW for the Elgin sweeper, which was $239,000. That's been deferred a couple of times. And it was something that Randy really wanted, but because it was $239,000, it's a big hit to the budget from the tax levy for capital. But given this additional money, we thought that made sense. So that's what makes the DPW the total of 443, which I think is what's up there, 289. And then the final thing we added was air handlers for the high school. And those are, it's a little fuzzy, but we allocated, I think the original request was $60,000. We allocated $62,564. The amount often ends up being a little bit more. And that makes the total school capital budget $1,018,532. So that's what we voted last night.
So, and are you recommending 2,500,168?
Yes,
Okay.
I do
And
recommend.
we had previously voted to approve the budget before the addition.
We didn't vote capital when it was presented. I don't
Okay,
believe-
so we're now voting the entire
amount of $2,500,168.
Okay. Questions or comments on the capital budget from members of AdCom? Not seeing any.
I will
Questions
say
or-
one of the reasons for the DPW in particular, that seemed to be one of the things the Harvard study indicated, that DPW was really shortchanged in our capital expenditures in some ways. And part of it's because virtually everything they need is just wicked expensive.
I love
That's
it
a
when a New
technical
York
capital
Yankees
term,
fan
right?
talks Boston.
Yeah, is that a Kentucky expression?
No, I learned that when I came here. No, I like everything in Boston except for those Red Sox.
Well, you're a wicked good AdCom member, Dave Lane. Thanks for the comments. Any other questions or comments from members of AdCom? Not seeing any hands. Any questions or comments from members of other town boards? Not seeing any hands, or the general public, not seeing any hands. So I think Dave Lean's affirmative motion is to approve a capital budget of $2,500,168. Is there a second?
Second.
All right, Dave, could you stop sharing so I can see people again? Thank you.
Oh, Bob,
No,
you
we-
missed us.
So we come to vote. I just don't want you voting twice again, George. Dave,
Aye.
Dave Lean,
Aye.
Brenda,
Aye.
Nancy,
Aye.
Andy,
Aye.
Victor,
Aye.
George,
Aye.
Erin,
Aye.
Alan,
Aye.
Kristen,
Aye.
Julie,
Aye.
Tina,
Aye.
and Evan.
Aye.
And I guess, Bob, one thing I should have said that I didn't is we did back out the ambulance out of the fire capital, and that ambulance is being funded this year out of this year's capital money. So we're not funding the ambulance. It's just being funded now.
I think we knew that from one of our forecast meetings. So congratulations, everybody. Thanks for all your great work. We have now voted the town budgets. And I understand the selectmen are going to readdress capital in view of outright last night, but it looks like we're on the same page. And Mary, is this a good time for you to take an opportunity to adjourn or recess your committee?
I will, and just before doing that, members of the advisory committee, you know, on behalf of our board, I know on behalf of the school committee, and more importantly, just from a grateful community, thank you for the hours and the diligence that you put into what is just such careful fiscal stewardship of our town. The time investment to meet with people, to understand budgets, to take a critical eye, and to make informed and objective points of view is just such an important part of what we do in our community. I was reminded that if you go back in time, town meeting has agreed with the advisory committee something like 99% of the time. And that is really just an endorsement of the caliber work that everybody does. We know that this year it's been challenging with COVID, with a delay in our revenue picture. So a typical intense period of time got more intense because it was sort of compressed a little bit more. We appreciate the professionalism, the care, and just your cheerful approach to all of this. we hope that as the warrant gets finalized, and I know there's still a little work to do that, but hopefully all of you can take a well-deserved breather. And I know when our warrant shows up in the mail, we will all just be grateful to all the great work that you're doing. And, you know, again, on behalf of all of us, we just say thank you to the committee. And Bob and Julie, thank you for your leadership of this committee. So with that, I would accept a motion for the Board of Selectmen to recess and resume in our meeting, at which point we will take up votes.
So move.
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor, Joe?
Aye.
Bill?
Aye.
Mary? Aye. Thanks, everybody. Good
Thank
night.
you, Mary.
Good night.
And Carrie Nee, is this a good time for you to adjourn our recess your committee?
Yes, before we do, I just want to echo everything Mary said, and thank you so much for all of the work that you do and for supporting our budget tonight. I think Hingham, the town, and our students are extremely fortunate for all of your work. It's been such a strange year and a very challenging year, and we know we have a lot of work ahead of us, but we're really looking forward to working with you on that. So with that said, I will take a motion to adjourn the school committee meeting.
So move.
I'll make a motion.
Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Thanks, Libby. Okay, Carlos?
Aye.
Libby?
Aye.
Jen?
Aye.
And I'm an aye as well. Thank you so much, everyone, and good night.
Thank you, Carrie. Thank you, members of the school committee.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Roston.
Thank you. You guys are doing amazing work.
We all had good educations.
Good luck when you
Okay.
get all the little darlings back full time.
At least they'll be wearing masks. Warrant article, review and approval of minutes from the meetings of March 9th, 16th, and 18th.
Now we get to the good stuff.
Evan, do you want to lead the discussion on this?
Yeah, no, George has all my edits and comments.
I think George has circulated all of those minutes. Various people have provided comments. Is there any further discussion of the minutes?
Bob, I just want to say that we did approve the minutes of the 9th last Tuesday night. So it's just the 16th and the 18th tonight.
You're right. Thank you. I'm glad I have many eyes upon me. Any further discussion of the minutes of the 16th? Is there a motion to approve the minutes of the 16th?
So moved.
For a second?
Second.
Nancy?
Aye.
Brenda?
Aye.
Andy?
Aye.
Dave?
Aye.
Victor?
Aye.
George? George?
Aye.
Thank you. Aaron?
Aye.
Alan?
Aye.
Dave-Elaine?
Aye.
Kristen?
Aye.
Julie?
Aye.
Tina?
Aye.
Evan?
Aye.
Okay, I think that's 13-0. So we come to the minutes of the March 18th meeting. Any further discussion or suggestions for further edits? I'm not seeing any hands or any other signals. Is there a motion to approve the minutes of March 18th as edited?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Second.
Nancy?
Aye.
Brenda?
Aye.
Andy?
Aye.
Dave?
Aye.
Victor?
Aye.
George?
Aye.
Aaron?
Aye.
Alan?
Aye.
Dave-Elaine?
Aye.
Kristen?
Aye.
Julie?
Aye.
Tina?
Aye.
Evan?
Aye.
Okay, we move on to warrant articles updates. I think we are basically on the home stretch doing editing and submissions. You know, if you haven't got an article into an editor yet, please make sure you do that promptly. We've got to have them all finished and submitted by next Tuesday. So just keep the flow going and we'll get them into the town administrator's office as they're received. I don't know if there are any liaison reports. Not seeing anything. I doubt everything else that's been going on. There's even been time for liaison report, liaison activities. AdCom housekeeping. I had posted a meeting for Monday night in the event that something happened tonight that we have to meet and vote on something. I don't think anything's happened tonight that is going to necessitate a meeting on Monday. So I expect to cancel that probably first thing on Monday morning, just so we preserve our options in the event that something happens tomorrow or over the weekend. I am not seeing the need for AdCom meetings in April, probably until maybe 2 weeks before the town meeting date, when we can talk about the AdCom policies and procedures. And I pull up my calendar. I think we may be looking at April 20th for our next meeting.
That's school vacation week, Bob?
Oh, is it? Well, we could go to April 27th.
You could have it that week,
You could have it that way.
right?
Well, does anyone, I mean, I wouldn't expect it to be an extraordinarily lengthy meeting. Would people like to have the school vacation week AdCom free?
I would.
Yes.
Yeah. Nancy's being good. I'm saying have the meeting. I won't be there, but have the meeting.
Are you trying to encourage us to want to have the meeting?
Yes, carry on.
That's kind of a structural deficit, isn't it?
Yeah.
Evan, this is the time of year when you want to show up because you might get a town meeting assignment that would not be your liking.
I'm pretty sure that won't happen.
I think I'm going to look at April 27th then.
Thank you.
And then maybe we'll have one more meeting very shortly before the town meeting. Sue, do you think whether we'll have the reserve fund transfer number by then?
I would hope so by then.
Okay, and Dave, do you think we'd have the Plymouth River School contract number?
That's a good question. I did get a text from Michelle Ayer earlier today saying she was meeting with the OPM today. So, I mean, I don't know. I hope so.
I mean, if we could kind of finalize what needs to go in a supplement that night, the 27th, that would be good.
Yeah, I'll make a point of reaching out to John, at the end of the week before and just see what's where the latest is.
Anybody see a need for any meetings before then? We've been going at it pretty hard. I think everybody deserves a break. Okay.
We all deserve a beer, actually.
Well,
or a bourbon, as the case may be, right, definitely.
Oh, yeah. You can all go to your respective refrigerators.
Well, maybe we could arrange like a beer truck to arrive at the high school field, like to time it at the end of town meeting so that we, instead of having to go down to the snug because we can't fit in there.
Hey, the Historical Society was delivering beer last weekend, so.
No drinking on the school premises.
Okay, well, all right, Carlos. You're supposed to be gone from this meeting, Carlos. No, I'm just kidding.
Why is that man still here?
Outdoor seating now.
I did have a preliminary conversation with Tom and Michelle at our Wednesday meeting yesterday about an election date. And it does seem likely that given that nothing has come up in the Board of Selectmen votes or in the AdCom votes that is triggering the need for an override, that the election is probably going to be scheduled for a Saturday in late May. Possibly the 22nd, but there's nothing carved in stone at this point. And I think that's all I've got to report. Are there any matters not anticipated?
Hey, Bob, just one quick question. Do we know a start time? Is there an estimated start time for town meeting on the 8th, assuming it happens on that day?
I am guessing that it's going to be noon.
Okay.
I know there was discussion about a start time. Last time, our friends in the Jewish community that have Sabbath on Saturday wanted to be able to participate in Sabbath services. And so I don't think we're going to be able to start before noon or 1. We'll, of course, have more. I think that's what we've done with both the June town meeting last year.
We met at 2 o'clock on for the special town meeting.
June started at 2, and the special town meeting started at noon.
Oh yeah, that's right. Okay.
And I think that's because of the limited daylight we had in the fall, whereas in June we could have gone till 8 o'clock if we needed to. So we might be back to a 2 o'clock start time, just because we're going to have a fair amount of daylight. So we'll see. I haven't been part of any discussion relating to a start time, but I'm sure that will come up soon.
So Bob, yeah, one thing before we finish. So if people have comments again about the policies and procedures or specific language, if you would get that now that taxes aren't due April 15th, if you would get that to me by April 15th so that I can prepare a draft that would circulate a few days before the April 27th meeting, I would appreciate it. And thanks to those of you who've already given me comments. So
great suggestion.
Can I just pass along two thoughts I had on that, Dave Illingworth here?
Please send them to me in email.
Okay.
Just because I'm collecting a lot of thoughts and I'm worried that my notes won't always be quite accurate.
Yeah, that's fair enough.
And because it's 10:04.
Another good point. And also Carlos is listening, so you gotta be careful.
You better be careful.
Are there any matters not anticipated within 48 hours that we need to bring up and discuss? I'm not seeing or hearing anything. I do want to say excellent work to get us to this night. Tremendous teamwork by everybody. Challenging discussions about questions that should be asked and need to be asked. So great job, everybody. Thanks. Mary Power said it well. So I would accept.
Appreciate it.
Moved.
Thank you.
Bob, can I just pass on something that someone told me? I guess I didn't fully realize how much management effort on the part of Tom and Michelle has gone into keeping the trains running on time during the pandemic. For example, the notion that town hall is divided into two teams, and you have to keep them separate because you cannot have a whole department coming down with COVID-19 at the same time, just as Tom instructed the police chief and the fire chief and their deputies not to be in the same place at the same time. I mean, I'm really impressed with how well they seem to have managed that. And I wish there was a way for the advisory committee to acknowledge, in addition to all the work they do to support us, that effort to keep everybody safe and keep all the operations up and running seems very impressive to me.
Absolutely.
Bob, are you looking for a motion to adjourn?
Are you thinking about making a motion to adjourn, Evan?
I can't. I think that's your job.
No, that's not my job. I will accept the motion to adjourn.
Oh, so moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Nancy?
Aye.
Brenda?
Aye.
Andy?
Aye.
Victor?
Aye.
George?
Aye.
Aaron?
Aye.
Alan?
Aye.
Evelyn?
Aye.
Kristen?
Aye.
Julie?
Aye.
Tina?
Aye.
Evan?
Aye.
Dave?
Aye.
I think that's it. Carlos, this is my gavel this year.
Hey, Bob, great job, by the way. Now that's off the record. Congrats to AdCom. Thank you so much for everything that you guys do. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for being with us and right back at you. All right. Good night, everybody. Thanks, Sue.
Good night, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.